NFL podcast called Living the Stream comes to you each week. Streaming recommendations during NFL season, it's not just tongue-in-cheek. Quarterback, defense, tight end recommendations based on opposition matchup. Here are your podcast hosts, JJ Zacharyson and Danny Carter, living the stream.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Living the Stream. I'm JJ Zacharyson, the late-round quarterback, and as always, I am joined by my lovely co-host, Danny Carter. Danny, what's going on, buddy?
Nothing much except for everything, because this is the busiest time of the season. In fact, I enjoy August, I think, more than the regular season. I don't know about you, but hope is alive in August, and you can't say the same for September and October.
That's true. I don't mind like September, October, most of November, and then Thanksgiving hits, and I'm done. I'm just done after Thanksgiving. It's really tough to be motivated after that time.
It's such a slog from Thanksgiving to the end of the season, and which is why I'm looking forward to the NFL eventually expanding to like a 27-week regular season. Yeah.
What's really cool about what the NFL did is that I usually would be able to take off after week 16 because that was fantasy football finals, right? And I would be able to enjoy time with my family over the holidays and not have to worry about that much. And now, because of Roger Goodell, my family hates me.
right. You can blame Raj.
Right. It's all his fault.
But they won't listen. I think that your family will still, and my family, my wife. Yeah. I mean, I'm actually writing a handwritten letter to Roger Goodell saying that my wife is going to leave me because you expanded to 17 weeks. And yeah, I think that's the way it goes. Before we get into the show completely, I just wanted to real quick address something that happened with me online last week. It was a situation where a member of Fantasy Twitter, Samantha Previtt, was run off of Twitter after tweeting about how she would rather use the word rostership or roster over own in fantasy vernacular. This is something I think we've addressed on the show. I think the big companies have addressed this as well. This sort of language. And we try not to use the word own. We still sometimes do slip, and I do too. But I just want to real quick say I handled that all wrong. Like I made it about me, and it wasn't about me. And I regret that because it could have been a moment, I think, where I rallied people to the cause of thinking about this language, and I blew it completely because it became a fight between me and a bunch of dudes who had already gone after Samantha, who is a very funny, intelligent, member of our little fantasy community. I was mad. I was upset online, and I know you're shocked to hear this, JJ. I was upset online, but I let that get the best of me, and then it just became a pissing match between me and 500 people. So I didn't handle it well. I'm sorry. It's not about me. I was mad that a bunch of guys ran a woman offline, and I'll try to do better next time.
Look, it's big of you to be able to see that and to be that self-aware and understand that. I mean, I didn't read your mentions because I'd probably get pissed off myself.
Oh.
I did that during that process, but I think it's important, for you to say that so that people understand that. Number one, I do think often there's this idea that if you have a readership, listenership, following of some sort, that you can't get upset or that you can't have emotion towards things that are happening online. And that's just not true. I mean, there's things that, I try my best to not get angry at responses that come my way. And I think I've, grown. I mean, the thing, like a lot of people have seen me grow as a human being through my being full-time doing this as my job. I started doing this when I was 24 years old. It's like, it's been a decade now. And anyone listening to this, I mean, who's older than 24, that, your self changes a lot throughout your 20s and the way that you view the world. And, the way that I would handle things back then is certainly a lot different than I handle them now. But even still, it's really easy to just get worked up. Even still, today, we're all human and we all have flaws, and it's not easy to just like sit there and just like take crap all the time. Right.
Right.
And it's big that you're able to be self-aware of how you handled that. And I think that you're right too. Like I understand why you reacted the way that you did 100%. It's not the way that I handle my social media, obviously.
No.
we go about it differently, but like, I understand why you reacted and handled it the way that you did, but I also think that it's really big to be able to reflect and say, yeah, it was probably not the best way to go.
Right. No. And it's not like, I quickly realized what I had done. I was provocative, challenging.
Right.
I basically asked people to come at me, not thinking that they would. I thought I didn't understand the gravity of the situation. All I knew is that I saw a woman on fantasy Twitter. So we're talking about, fantasy Twitter is what, 0.3% women. Okay.
Right.
And the one of the more successful women in the community has to delete her account because guys felt slightly disrespected about how she posted. That doesn't happen with men. That doesn't happen with dudes. I'm sorry. It just doesn't. So I can't imagine what she went through, because I can tell you from my DMs, it wasn't fun. It wasn't enjoyable. It was a little bit frightening at times. I felt obliged to speak up. I should have done it differently. Anyway, we can get on with the show.
Speaking of men versus women and taking crap online, like if you go and you look at any female in sports and see a tweet that they send, there's at least half the responses are related to their appearance, like legitimately. And so like if it's like a video or something that they had posted, not just like a random take. And so this past week, Arizona, it became legal to play DFS and stuff in Arizona. And FanDuel asked me to just do a very quick video being like, Arizona, like it's, DFS is open, whatever.
Welcome.
So we posted a video and it was me, like the first, it's only 3 seconds of me. And then it got into like some graphics and stuff with me doing a voiceover. And I got a response from someone. Maybe this person might have been joking because I've mentioned Great Clips so often on the show and how I go to Great Clips. But he mentioned something about, is that a Sports Clips haircut, right? And I could either take it as like, this dude's coming at me right now for my haircut, or he's just having fun because I've talked about this on the show. Maybe he's one of the few living the stream, the 17 living the stream listeners. And so I responded and I was like, actually, it was Great Clips. And then like someone else had responded and was like very clearly making fun of my haircut. Like this next person who responded. Right. And I'm thinking like, I'm not getting like angry. Like, I don't really care. I even like sent it to my one friend and I was like, is my hair bad in this video? Like what's going on here? But then I started thinking to myself, like, women take this shit all the time. Sorry, the kids,
nonstop,
all the time on social media. Go read any of the comments after they post a video. It is people saying like, oh, I love that dress, or, oh, you gained a few pounds or something like that. And I'm just like, what the hell is wrong with people? Like, can we please, for the love of God, like, I understand if you want to get mad online about like the own versus roster, whatever, like, fine. That's like that's not, you're not really attacking an individual necessarily. Like you're attacking like a general idea more than anything else. But when and I don't necessarily agree with that either, but I'm just saying like, it's very different versus attacking the actual human being and the way that they look, the way that they act. And it's always someone who's got an anonymous account on Twitter with a dog as their avatar. It's always that dog person.
Anonymity. Sorry to the dogs who are listening, but yeah, I mean, anonymity is an incredibly effective and powerful weapon online. And I had sort of forgotten about that because it's been a long, long time since I've gotten into a kerfuffle like that. And the nastiest, most horrifying things were DM'd and said in the replies by anonymous guys, and they can say whatever they want. And it's I don't know, and I can't imagine what women in sports go through every day. It's truly horrifying.
Yeah, it really is. So Denny, before we get to our bold predictions, we're going to each give two. We do this every year. If you guys have listened to the Late Round podcast or read my article, you already know what's coming from my end, but it's, some of you haven't, and it's still fun to talk about it. But what's going on over at NBC Sports Edge?
Yeah, glad you asked. Well, we had about 780 blurbs, something like that, yesterday, as rosters were cut down on Tuesday. Lots of updates, kind of how backfields shook out, how wide receiver groups shook out. So check out the site, but also check out our draft guide. Our draft guide has tiered rankings for every conceivable league that you could ever want. So check it out. It is at NBCSportsEdge.com.
Do you want to give the first bold prediction?
I do. And I hope that this is bold enough. I'll just give it a whirl. We didn't run these by each other.
No, I have no idea what you're about to say. So
no, I could say anything at this point. All right. Dan Arnold will be a top 10 tight end this year.
Dan Arnold. Wow, this is some Terrace Marshall slander right here. Like indirectly.
It is. You're right. Okay, I rescind it. No. Yeah. So it's true. Yeah, Terrace Marshall does. Entered my mind as I was coming up with this bold take. But it was hard to ignore tight end usage in Carolina last year. You had Ian Thomas, who could have been a mainstay in LTS circles, but sadly was not. He ran the 9th most routes among all tight ends last year. Somehow, he drew only 30 targets, and he was a complete non-factor statistically. By all accounts, according to The Athletic and other publications, Dan Arnold has been the go-to guy for Sam Darnold. These are very difficult names to mix and match. In the red zone in training camp and in the preseason, Arnold is not bad. That's the thing, is like he actually might be kind of good. Mm-hmm. Dan Arnold was 7th in fantasy points over expectation last year. I don't understand how that happened, but he makes the most of his opportunity. And honestly, a top 10 tight end is not saying a whole lot, but I mean, from where you could get him in drafts, it would be a major value.
So he's your late round, like Logan Thomas type breakout this year.
I think because he's going to run a lot of routes, and that's kind of what helped me come to terms with Logan Thomas as a late round pick last year. Is like, this guy's going to be on the field a lot this year. I think Dan Arnold will be much more touchdown dependent because he has to compete for targets with a great receiving core, right? In Robbie Anderson, Moore, and your boy Terrace. So it might not be so easy, but I think that everything is looking up for Dan Arnold.
I'm going to go with the bold prediction that was actually tweeted from the FanDuel account at one point and got a lot of hate. Just like borderline death threats from this from this take. It's that the best fantasy football quarterback this season with the first name Justin will be Justin Fields.
Oh, baby.
So the thought process behind this is obviously the cheat code, the Konami code that you get with rushing quarterbacks, right? I think Justin Herbert's capable of maybe eventually being I think he's capable of being a Josh Allen type. I just don't think he's aggressive like Josh Allen is on the ground. And so, there's a very real possibility we just don't see that at all from Justin Herbert. We saw it a little bit last year. He had like 5 rushing touchdowns, but down the stretch last season, Justin Herbert was not the best fantasy quarterback. He scored fewer than 17 fantasy points in 4 of his final 6 games. He saw his touchdown rate from the first half of the season to that point in the season drop by about 2.5%. So what happens if he has somewhat of a sophomore slump? That's the downside of Justin Herbert. And we know that he's not bringing a lot of juice with his legs. Whereas what we've seen over the last couple of years is top 12 quarterbacks have gotten a lot more fantasy points, or a larger percentage of their fantasy points coming via the ground. They've come, over the last 2 years, it's been well over 18% of fantasy points among top 12 quarterbacks have been scored on the ground. Whereas the 8 to 10 years before that number was closer to 12 to 15%. So we're seeing more and more rushing quarterbacks jump into the top 12. Justin Fields, we've already seen him flash that in the preseason. He ran a 4.40 at his pro day. I mean, the dude has a high ceiling, even though he's a rookie. I mean, this is just the way that fantasy football works. So, I would say that this is more of a points per game thing because we don't know when Justin Fields is going to find the field. But I would not be shocked. Really, I wouldn't be shocked if Justin Fields ends up outscoring on a points per game basis Justin Herbert this year.
I'm with you. I mean, it is bold. I'm not saying it's not bold, but it is. It's reasonable also because of the rushing. Just look at the way. This is my film analysis on Justin Fields. Okay, you ready for this?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Watch him in the preseason. That guy glides. He just glides. I mean, just like it reminds me of the way like Josh Gordon used to glide and be faster than everybody.
What it reminds me of Vince Young. Remember when Vince Young?
Oh, yeah.
It never looked like Vince Young was even running, and then he would be like 15 yards past the linebackers. Like that's the way that I feel with Justin Fields, is that he's just so fast and so athletic, and he can escape the pocket so quickly. And then you see that one tight window throw, that touchdown that he threw, that everyone's like, oh, wasn't it like, why is this so special? No, that's like a great throw. Like that was an incredible throw. I don't care that he's playing against second stringers. He's also playing with second stringers. And so I'm excited to see what Justin Fields can do.
I think he's an incredible passer. I'm sure that he's a little bit raw, whatever, but like, according to the athletic reporter for the Bears, Fields just wows coaches every day with the way he changes his arm angle. Like he's a good passer, but that's, for fantasy purposes, we're looking for the rushing, and it is just it's hard to overemphasize how valuable it would be for your quarterback to roster a quarterback who rushes for 50, 60, 70 yards a game.
Yeah. The other thing too, with Justin Fields and his passing, Jim Sonis at Number Fire does a statistically superior quarterbacks is what he calls it article every year on college prospects. And Justin Fields' strength of schedule last season was essentially the hardest that we've seen of any quarterback over the last decade.
Really?
And he still was that good. Yeah. So he's got a lot going for him. I'm excited to see what happens, especially when he actually gets like Allen Robinson to throw the ball to.
Right. And Moon, excuse me, and Mooney.
Yeah. My voice is already going right now, and it's not even the start of the season. Like I can already feel my throat is like raw, and I'm not even like, I haven't even started doing the 4 episodes per week.
I talk too much these days. I just need to stop talking. All right. Ready for my second one?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Second bold take is that Terry McLaurin will finish as a top 5 wide receiver. That's not super hot because he's going at wide receiver 13 at the moment. But he was wide receiver 20 last year in points per game, with by almost any measure, the worst quarterbacking situation in the entire NFL. Just to give you an idea of how bad Dwayne Haskins was, he had the lowest catchable rate on his throws of 57% and the lowest on target rate of 43% last year. And somehow, some way, Terry McLaurin still turned in a top 20 fantasy season. He has a massive upgrade at quarterback, obviously with whoever, with Fitzpatrick, with Heineke, with either of those guys. I think it's a market upgrade. Guys who can get it downfield, can make stronger throws, more accurate throws. And like I said, he's being drafted, at wide receiver 13. So it wouldn't be a monster type deal for him to outperform his ADP by seven spots. But I think he has a ton of upside in both receiving yards and touchdowns. He was 13th in receiving yards last year. I had no idea. How did that happen?
Yeah, he's good. That's how. He's a very, very good wide receiver. I'm gonna stick with a onesie position bold prediction here. I'm gonna say both Tyler Higbee and Dallas Goedert will finish outside the top 12 at the tight end position this year.
Oof.
So here's why I feel this is a thing. So over the last 10 years, if you look at tight ends drafted between rounds 6 through 9, that were not the first pass catcher drafted from their team. So that's Dallas Goedert. That's Logan Thomas, even. That's Tyler Higbee. because you have, Devontae Smith, both Rams wide receivers, and Terry McLaurin, who you just mentioned, being drafted ahead of those guys. We've had 55 of those types of tight ends. Of those 55, only 3 of them broke out in any significant way. The guys who you really want to target are tight ends who are the first pass catchers being drafted from their team, which is why you should feel fairly confident this year in a guy like Mark Andrews, a guy like TJ Hawkinson. Even though they're not totally mid-round picks, they fall in that 5th round area pretty often, and it still sort of applies to them regardless. Tyler Higbee, I understand, has the ceiling because of Gerald Everett and what we've seen in the splits with and without Everett. But we also should be cognizant that that's a small sample, and it shouldn't shock anyone if, he's just not involved like we think that he's involved. That's the downside for Tyler Higbee. The downside with Dallas Goedert is honestly Zach Ertz. I feel like the market has not corrected enough with Dallas Goedert to correct Zach Ertz being on that team. Goddard last season had basically he had one big performance with Zach Ertz healthy. When Zach Ertz was not healthy and not playing, that's when Goddard really blew up. That's when I think he had like 4 top 12 performances last year, and 3 of them came when Zach Ertz was out. And so I'm very nervous about what that could look like. Not only that, but we don't know what kind of passer Jalen Hurts really is yet. We know that Jalen Hurts is a great fantasy quarterback, but we still have that in the back of our heads. We don't know how pass heavy they're going to be. There's just a lot of ambiguity there. So I wouldn't be shocked. I feel better about Tyler Higbee, honestly, at this point than Dallas Goedert. But I don't, I was more into Higbee in like July when I was thinking about like upside and all this stuff, but there's still just such an opportunity cost in that area because I really like a lot of the wide receivers there that I've gotten to the point where I'm just not drafting those tight ends. I'm either getting a top 6 tight end, or I'm just punting and getting like Jonnu or something like that later. And so this is sort of like playing into how I feel about the market in general with these tight ends, but also I think these individual guys just have a lower floor than where they're being drafted right now.
I have come around on Logan Thomas over Higbee.
Yeah, me too.
And I really wasn't there back in July, but in August I've definitely come around to that idea, partly because of his quarterback upgrade, but also because of his because of Thomas's place in the offense. Like he definitely has a place in that Washington offense. We're not positive about Higbee's place with in the LA offense. Goddard should be like a late round flyer, like Ertz. Ertz is a late round flyer.
Yeah, I understand the way people view Goddard, but it's still like at the end of the day, his ADP has not shifted that much since we learned the news that it's likely that Zach Ertz is going to be a Philadelphia Eagle.
Yeah. I mean, that it all came down to that. Like, yeah, it hasn't, the ADP has not corrected itself, not even close to what you would think, how you would think it would be corrected. But I actually am okay. If you're really desperate, if you've completely faded tight end in your drafts, I'm all right with taking Ertz as just a cheap PPR machine like he's always been. Rich Rebar has always called Ertz souped up Jason Witten, right? Or something.
Right, yeah. I mean, he's basically this. He's like new era Jason Witten.
Yeah,
and whenever he gets the ball.
It works for a late round guy. But yeah, Goddard is probably good, probably great. He could be a really great fantasy producer one day if Zach Ertz ever goes away. But it didn't happen. So we have to adjust our ranks.
Yeah. All right. So let's get to, we have some questions to answer. We got some from our lovely patrons over on Patreon, and then we have some from Twitter as well. So we can get to these. The first one is, we'll start with the guys on Patreon. Carlos says, lost Irv Smith. He's done for the year, more than likely, and was planning on streaming tight end here. Help 12 team PPR. Do you have any, just general dart throws at the tight end position that you think people should be looking at right now, maybe for week 1, maybe have season long upside? I think that tight end streaming, at the beginning of the season, it's a little bit more difficult because you should always be looking for that season long potential, but we have very, very little data to work off of right away early in the season. And you're talking about like you're just hoping to luck into a touchdown for the most part.
That's right.
I mean, we're going to use evidence like this team should score a lot this week. They have a good quarterback, et cetera, et cetera. The matchup looks good on paper, but we don't know that as much, going into week 1. So, who are some, let's just talk general late round, super late round as well, tight ends that you're okay with drafting that you think might be on the waiver wire in a lot of leagues right now?
I mean, Ertz, obviously my guy, Dan Arnold, top 10, lock it in. Those are two guys that come to mind. I guess someone like Conklin from Minnesota, now that Irv Smith is probably done for the year. Really unfortunate. But I know they signed Chris Herndon, and I think they did that because Conklin is a good blocker, and Minnesota values him as a good blocker, as a part of that running attack. So it's possible that once Herndon becomes acclimated with the system, that Herndon will take on that pass catching role. But I think to start the year, I think Conklin is fine.
So I did a study on finding breakout tight ends. And one of the things that is glaring is that breakout tight ends generally have good quarterbacks associated with them, more so than wide receivers. So if you look at all breakout, the way I defined it is I looked at ADP versus postseason result. I found a trend line, and then I found which players exceeded that trend line, exceeded expectation, most. And so at the tight end position, I used 75 or more points because there's just not a lot of tight ends. At wide receiver, I used 100 or more points to get a big enough sample size for both positions. At wide receiver, of the breakout wide receivers, the average ADP of their quarterbacks was QB 19. So it was pretty much irrelevant, where their quarterbacks were going. At tight end, it was like QB 11 to 13. I can't remember which one. It was like somewhere in that range, right? So it was like a low end QB 1 on average. And so if you then look at tight ends who had top 5 quarterbacks, there was a big gap. Like the hit rate among tight ends with top 5 quarterbacks was so much bigger than 6 to 10, 11 to 15, et cetera. Like if you bucket them that way. And so if you look at top 5 quarterbacks by ADP and then associate them with their tight ends, 2 guys to me really stick out. And they stuck out during this study, but one of them is emerging a little bit more now. One of them was Blake Jarwin, but now Dalton Schultz is a little bit more involved, so it's not as easy to sort of latch onto him. The other one is Dawson Knox, and Jacob Hollister just got cut yesterday. We're recording this on Wednesday. Jacob Hollister just got cut from Buffalo. Buffalo has their issues at wide receiver right now as well. I wouldn't be, I say issues just because there's a lot of just ambiguity going on with the group. I wouldn't be shocked if this is a potential breakout situation for Dawson Knox in Buffalo. He's someone that I'm targeting very, very late in like I did the Mike Clay's going deep draft last night, and I got him at like tight end 30 because it's a start 2 tight end league. I'm kind of intrigued by Dawson Knox. Let me just give you an example of this. If you look at tight ends drafted after pick 150 over the last decade, and you look at tight ends who then had a top 5 quarterback, these tight ends who had a top 5 quarterback attached to them, you have 24 tight ends who had ADPs drafted after 150 and had a top 5 quarterback. Of those 24, 4 of them were, quote, breakout tight ends, which really is not that bad of a hit rate when you're talking about players who are being drafted after pick 150. You have Julius Thomas the year that he broke out. You have Benjamin Watson in New Orleans 1 year, Kobe Fleener 1 year in Indianapolis. And then Brent Selleck actually was one of them.
Wow.
Back in 2011. It was probably Donovan McNabb as his quarterback. And so I'm a little bit intrigued by that. And I think another guy that you could look at as like a very, very deep option. Like I think going after like Jonnu Smith is a great idea right now. I mean, like Jonnu fits so much of the mold of what I generally am looking for in a breakout tight end and a late round tight end. And I know his ADP is rising a little bit, probably because of the Mac Jones stuff, but I still think Jonnu is a really, really good pick. But another guy is Juwan Johnson out of New Orleans, who's now running as their primary pass catching tight end. Adam Troutman's banged up too. And he's an ex wide receiver. He's younger, but he's an ex wide receiver. If they use him in that role, and there are no pass catchers in that offense, I think that Juwan Johnson could be someone who surprises.
Yeah, I was going to mention Johnson, who it was listed recently on DraftKings as a wide receiver. So
really?
Yeah, I'm hoping that changes at some point. I think it will.
Yeah.
Getting back to Knox real quick. I really like Knox, because of what she said, attaching your late round, or like getting a late round tight end who is attached to an elite quarterback in Josh Allen. But Knox is on the field a lot. He doubled the snap count of the next closest Buffalo tight end last year. He didn't run a ton of routes like I have 21 and a half pass routes per game last year. That's not fantastic, but that can rise. And the team, and this is not quite quantifiable, but the team wants Dawson Knox to be a thing, like desperately. They want Dawson Knox. And you kind of saw that last year in Buffalo's postseason run. He kind of teased us. He had 11 catches and 2 touchdowns in Buffalo's 3 playoff games. So, he can be a thing. And if the receiver injuries don't get any better, I think that's even better for Knox.
Yeah. Let's go to Neil Dutton on Patreon. He said, I was informed on the Twitter that streaming tight ends was a myth. If this is true, can I hold you two personally responsible for how much time I've spent on the subject? I want to address this because a lot of people saw my response on Twitter when Dave Kluge, great guy and great analyst, he sent a tweet out that said that tight end streaming is generally a myth and, was tweeting about it a little bit. And I don't think that either of us necessarily like fully disagree with the take. I think that the disagreement is a lot of it is based on recency bias because if you look at the last couple of seasons, it's been a lot more, last season especially, it was a lot more difficult to stream the tight end position and the quarterback position for that matter. But it was a lot easier or a lot more difficult last year to stream the tight end position. The reason in 2019, we streamed the tight end 4 in points per game. And that was without the benefit of, because that was Darren Waller's breakout. Yeah. That was without the benefit of just holding on to Darren Waller and having him as a tight end for us throughout the season, right? Because we have to adjust based on percent rostered. And so, I don't think that I don't think that you should go into a season because, this is where I do agree with Dave is that, don't go into a season saying I'm going to stream tight ends no matter what. You should, and don't even do that with quarterback. You should be trying to find a guy who you can plug and play each and every week. But the argument for tight end streaming is that tight end is such a D-fire, late in, I can't believe, why did I shorten dumpster there?
I couldn't figure out what you meant. I was like a dick fire. Sorry to the kids. So tight end is such a dumpster fire. Once you get to tight end 8, 9, 10, it's not that hard to match that kind of production with guys off the waiver wire because you need like 4 catches for 40 yards and maybe you might not even need a touchdown in a PPR format to get close to matching that. So, that's where I stand with the tight end streaming stuff. I just want to address that a little bit because, I responded to Dave and there was a lot of like, oh yeah, you got you, man. That's not what this is. Guys, when I respond to people on Twitter, like I'm legitimately trying to have a discussion about fantasy football. I'm not trying to like drive someone off of the platform, right? Yeah, I just want a back and forth. I'm just trying to like learn more and see where someone else's brain is at so that I can become a better analyst. It's not like trying to get this person. Like Dave is a really good guy. He's a very nice person. I'm not trying to like argue with a dude. I'm just having a discussion. Stop being the kids in the lunchroom in the cafeteria saying fight.
You're right. Fight. Right. I can't stand that. That stuff annoys me more than literally anything that happens in my mentions. Like people can call me whatever they want. They can say, I cannot stand when people pit analysts against each other. I hate it.
I mean, you were just discussing, and saying, oh no, well, it actually can be done. And the goal is not to stream. That's something that gets lost in these conversations. And I've come to grips with the fact that there's no pushing back against the idea that we want to stream all the time, and which is just not the case. Like you definitely want to land a Waller and just be set. Like no one wants to stream.
Right.
I think that gets lost. Oh, one more tight end. We're talking about streaming tight ends. Tyler Kroft with Herndon gone.
Tyler Kroft. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, with Herndon gone in New York, like Tyler Kroft's going to be like a thing. He's going to run a ton of routes. He's going to be on the field a lot. I like him a lot.
Yeah, I still think Donald Parham is interesting too. If you guys just want to, he's more of like a stash type tight end. Right. If you can roster multiple, but yeah, Tyler Kroft is someone who's a lot safer and should get production right away. We got another one from Tom S. Favorite late round targets in redraft. So let's just, I have a list. I'll just throw it out there because I know this is hard to think of just off the top of your head and just be like, so depends what you're talking about with late. Like I really like getting, for instance, Michael Pittman, right? But he's not like late. If you're talking late, I'm into going after like a Tyson Williams right now. We already talked about Dawson Knox, Josh Palmer. I have so much Josh Palmer in redraft right now.
Really?
And I didn't even like him at all. I barely knew him as a prospect. Like he was in my model and like I knew that he existed, but I did not expect him to have the draft capital that he had. But the positive vibes out of camp with him in LA, the fact that they don't have a lot of competition there. Hunter Henry's gone too. I mean, it wouldn't shock me at all if he has like some sort of role. AJ Green, someone who I think is interesting because he's going to probably play on the outside right away in Arizona across from DeAndre Hopkins. Rondell Moore in that same offense, I think is intriguing too. Paris Campbell, especially now that the T.Y. Hilton injury happened. I feel like Emmanuel Sanders is very undervalued right now. Still, I think that there's this assumption that Gabriel Davis is going to be the starter there, but it's by some people, but it's not the case. I mean, he's still number 4 on that team. And so Emmanuel Sanders is going to be on the field right away in a pass friendly offense with Josh Allen. So I like that. And then, just go after those pass catching backs like James White. Gio Bernard is a Denny favorite. Ty Johnson, I think, is intriguing. And then the other guy who I'm also drafting everywhere is Boston Scott. I genuinely think that Boston Scott is going to have a role immediately on that team, given how that coaching staff talks about running backs and how they've utilized running backs in the past, the systems that they come from. And Miles Sanders has also had pass catching woes. Now, I will say this, I'm a big Kenny Gainwell stan. And I loved him during the draft process. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he emerges, especially like during the second half of the season, as like the primary pass catching back there. But I think if you need that like cheap RB2 points, if you went like hero RB or something, Boston Scott in a PPR format's fine. And they get Atlanta in week 1. So kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, I have a lot of Boston Scott. I mean, as a zero RB truther, a lot of those running backs that you just said are on my rosters often together. Ramondre Stevenson in every single draft for me is a thing that's happening and has been happening for a while. Cam being released is, I think, it was great news for all, for fantasy purposes across the New England lineup, including Stevenson. I understand Damian Harris is going to get first crack at that early down role, but Stevenson can kind of do it all. Like, he was a good pass catcher and a productive pass catcher in college. So James White is not going to go anywhere. I understand that. But Stevenson could really, really pop in that offense if he gets the shot. And in a long season, like we have, I think that it's a good chance he's going to get a chance.
Yeah, I liked him as a prospect. A lot of people thought that he was a plotter. And I understand that to some degree, but when he was active and playing, because he had like a suspension and like during his junior season or something, because he was like a transfer and he had all these issues, whatever. But when he played, his reception share and the way they utilize him as a receiver at that size was like alarming. Yeah. I was like, holy crap, he's got like a 15% reception share per game. And I was all about that. Next question is from Jamie from Patreon. He says, how do you guys manage to keep things fresh after being together all these years? I mean, massages.
I wear a little skimpy outfit for the podcast. I'm actually wearing my NBC Sports Edge pullover right now, so that's not true. I'm
wearing my Dickies t-shirt.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if we can say that on air, but we try to spice it up a little bit. No, there's no secret besides liking the podcast, enjoying talking to each other. I think
it's friendship and we respect each other, and it's a lot easier to do shows when you have that. Trust me, if I didn't like Denny at this point, we would not be doing a show. It's just
the last limit in the stream would have been 2015.
That's right. This last one from Patreon is from Johnny Pastrami. Which, in your humble opinions, is the best burger chain restaurant?
Oh man, what are you going with?
They finally put so as you guys know, I eat like a just a frail geriatric at this point,
like a bird, I would say.
Yeah, basically. But they did put a Shake Shack finally down here in my community. And it was very good. I mean, because it's not as disgustingly greasy as like Five Guys. Like I feel like Five Guys is like a go-to answer for this question for a lot of people. But I find maybe it's because I ate a lot of it in college because it was on Pitt's campus. But like I find Five Guys to just be incredibly greasy and heavy and just gross.
It is. The grease soaks through the bun.
Yeah, it's just too much for me. Like I can't handle that stuff anymore, man. Like I even like, you know, I now eat gluten dairy free pizza. There's a pizza shop that does. I know it sounds disgusting. It sounds horrible, but like, I don't know any of you who like eat pizza and afterwards you're just like, cause there's just so much grease on it and stuff. Yeah. Right. But I'm eating like this gluten dairy free pizza. It doesn't have that same kind of like grease element to it. And it's so much more enjoyable. And maybe it's because I'm in my 30s now. And this is just the way that human bodies evolve. And like, you just can't consume that kind of grease anymore, but it's a lot more of an enjoyable experience when you don't have to like deal with that grease.
JJ, I get it. I have been dabbing the hell out of my pizza.
Yeah.
Since I don't know, since I was in my early 20s. I'm disgusted by the grease on pizza. I'm disgusted by pizza generally, but you know, I will eat it if it's the only thing. If that's what we have for dinner, folks, I'm eating it. But I will dab it until there is little to no grease on it. So you're telling me that the special hippie pizza that you eat is it doesn't have grease?
No, it doesn't have a lot because like the cheese, there's no like, it's not dairy filled cheese, right? It's dairy free cheese, and it's just there's not grease on it because of the way they make it, because of what the ingredients are and stuff.
I got to get some of this pizza.
It's good. It's good. Yeah. Anyone in my area, hit me up and I'll send you a link to this place.
I used to work in Bethesda, Maryland, which is a place with lots of very fancy eating establishments, including there was a pizza shop like that, and I was always grossed out by it. But it turns out I probably would have liked it more than traditional pizza. Oh wow.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna go to Twitter now. I think this is one of the better questions we've gotten in a while. So congrats to Jason Brown at @1punna, friend of the show. He says, whenever you go to a grocery store, i.e. Harry Teeter's or whatever, which direction do you go first, right or left?
I go further right than my dad's politics.
It is. I honestly, I read this question and I thought to myself, who among us goes left when you enter a grocery store?
No one.
No. Who, like, I need people to hit us up and say that they go left. And not only that, maybe film yourself going left to prove it, because I don't believe you.
They will do it.
I probably shouldn't say that because someone will film themselves walking into a grocery store.
Oh man.
But no one goes left. You don't go left. And then I was also thinking, how many groceries, because you usually go to the produce first and it's usually on the right, like typically on the right. But then I was thinking to myself, although my local Whole Foods has produce on the left, and it kind of started throwing me off because I don't go to Whole Foods that I usually am a Harris Teeter snob, but Whole Foods is probably even like more snobbish, but the produce, sorry to everyone who goes to Whole Foods. I just made fun of 50% of our audience. Yeah. But the produce is on the left at our Whole Foods, and I still go right, but I'm not going to Whole Foods for like a traditional shopping experience. Usually it's usually for like, back before COVID, like salad bar stuff and whatnot, right? Not to get my groceries.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Most stores are designed to filter you right. Like you go in and you're filtered right, and then you do a loop, right?
Yeah.
And I've heard, is this true? Have you ever heard this? That if you stay on the outside of the grocery store and never go into the aisles, that that's where the healthy food is.
Yes, I think that's true, but it's also, there's a lot of, I remember back in college, I took a quantitative methods class, and we, you talk about like cues and like, lines and stuff, and like how to properly adjust lines for like checkout and whatnot. But also there was a lot of like grocery store, like I'm sure there's like a degree in like grocery store theory or something like that. Like to get people to behave in certain ways. That's why in a grocery store, the milk and the bread is usually like in the back of the store, because they want you to walk through the store in order to get the most substantial thing that most people need to get.
The exposure. So you're exposed to all the shit.
Exactly. Exactly. And so there's stuff like that we are just being controlled by corporate America, as we all know.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. People. Yeah. I think we have to come to terms with that.
Yeah, it's crazy the amount of stuff that these people are doing to us.
It's why I go to the store sometimes planning to buy 3 things and I end up spending $80.
You're right. Maybe we should be going left when we enter the grocery store, like just to be like, you know what? Screw you, Harris Teeter. Screw you, Kroger corporate.
I'm going left.
I'm not going right. You want me to go right.
It feels like a crime against nature, though, I have to say, to go left.
Yeah, for real. All right, I think that's all we're going to be able to get to today, Denny. That was a good one to end on, though. I think that it'll spark some conversation on Twitter.
I think so.
Why don't you let everyone know where they can find you?
Yeah. I'm almost afraid to tell people to go to my Twitter now, but it's at CDCarter13 on Twitter. All my work is on NBC Sports Hedge. I recently wrote the Week 1 kicker column, folks. It's out. You can stop pelting my house with eggs. I'd appreciate that very much. Stop leaving dog feces on my doorstep. The kicker column's out. Check it out on NBCSportsEdge.com.
I'm on Twitter at Late Round QB. I have my other podcast, the Late Round Podcast, which can be found anywhere podcasts can be found. I should say that if you guys want to join our Patreon, it's the Living the Stream Patreon. We will in season be posting our streamers early on that page before we record this show. So if you are a patron, I feel like I said Patreon.
Yeah, you did.
if you're a patron, you will get those early and be able to sort of mess with your waiver wire before we do the show. And that's really, the Patreon is the way that we're able to sustain the show and do this show. So we really appreciate all of our patrons. If you guys want to go join that, go search for it, go look for it. Denny, maybe some dairy-free milkshakes. Does that work for you?
That's fine. I'm willing to try. In my old age, I'm willing to try anything.
Okay. Thanks, Denny. All right. Thanks, everyone. We will catch you next week for our Week 1 show.
Thank you for listening to Living the Stream. We hope you enjoyed the internet podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes now. It won't take long. It's fast. For more fantasy football info, check out lateroundqb.com. Hope you come back soon as we share about the team.